Hello and welcome to another tier list video. Today we are taking a look at Modern Warfare 2 maps. Now I'm a huge fan of Modern Warfare 2, played it so many hours back in the day. I really love some of these maps and some of them not quite as much, so I'm just going to be ranking them based on how much I enjoyed playing them, whether it's custom games or in multiplayer. So starting us off, we have Afghan, which is of course a picture that I've seen a ton of times because anytime you go into a custom game, alphabetically it's the first map, so it's the default one. But honestly, I think it's a really solid map. You know, it's a decent map if you want to just play some custom quick-scoping games with your friends. But in multiplayer as well, I think it's a really solid one. There's a good balance between mid and long-range fights, and then also closer range fights with a handful of buildings and of course the caves. So Afghan, honestly, I just really enjoyed this one. I think the desert map, you know, works pretty well here, so gonna find itself up in the A tier. Up next, we have Derail, which is a very large winter map, and in Call of Duty games I'm typically not a huge fan of the winter theme. I find that the colors just end up being a little bit too plain, a little bit too washed out. I suppose you could say the same thing about Afghan, but particularly on Derail. And also this map was huge, so pretty much never played custom games with this one. Played it a bit in multiplayer, but honestly the map is almost too big and there's not really anything unique or special about it that makes me really like it. I can remember playing some capture the flag games on Derail that would often end in ties just because the map was so big. It was so hard to capture the opponent's flag without dying and having them return it. Even if you're running lightweight at marathon, it takes a while to get around the entire map. So Derail, it's not a bad map. There's not really anything that I, really dislike about it, but it's just not doing anything special for me. So it's going to find itself in a pretty mediocre C tier. Up next, we have Estate, which honestly has a bit of a soft spot for me in my heart because Estate was the map where I got my very first tactical nuke in Modern Warfare 2. Honestly, I still remember that entire game so vividly, running the Harrier Strike AC-130 tactical nuke. And I remember only getting like 3 kills with my AC-130, so I was using AK with red dot, and I had to get a lot of kills with that, but made it work in the end. And that moment in my Call of Duty career was always really special for me. So this map, it's got a special place in my heart. But outside of that, I actually think the map is really good. It's a relatively open map, so it's good for taking middle and long range fights, but you can also go into the building. There's always going to be people in there if you want to take close range fights. And in objective game modes, there's almost always an objective inside the house, so I would say it's a pretty well balanced map, and like I said, got a tactical nuke on it, so definitely really enjoy it, and it's going to find itself up in the S tier. Up next, we have Favela. Honestly, this is probably one of my favorite city-based maps in any Call of Duty game. I'm not always a huge fan of city-based maps because I find a lot of them play kind of the same, but Favela is a bit of an exception. I would say it's mostly a close and medium range map, but you can take some long range engagements. But the thing I love about Favela is the map has really great depth. You can fight on the streets, you can fight in the buildings, you can fight on the second floor, and then almost every single building you can get onto the rooftop. I feel like every single part of this map you can get to and you can shoot somebody. Like, you can get shot from a million places, but you can also shoot at people from a million different places. So I just feel like it's probably the best city-based map I've played in a Call of Duty game. And honestly, it's going to find itself up in the S tier as well. Up next, we have Highrise. Now, honestly, this map, it's got a special place in my heart as well because I have spent so many hours playing custom games on Highrise. It was a great map to play hide and seek, Michael Myers, cops and robbers. Didn't really use it for quick scoping, but if you had like 6, 7, 8 friends, you could fill up this map and have a ton of fun. There were so many glitches and places you could get to on this map. And honestly, it was just a ton of fun. Really enjoyed this one. For multiplayer, it's still a solid map, but for me, I really loved Highrise because of the potential with playing custom games with friends. Spent so many hours playing those games, so Highrise, honestly, is also going to find itself up in the S tier. Up next, we have Invasion. Now, this is another, I would say, more so city-based map, and as I kind of talked about before, I think a lot of these maps kind of play the same. And Invasion, while it's certainly not a bad map, I would say it's just kind of a watered-down version of Favela for me. There's still some house-to-house fighting in the streets. Some buildings you can go to the second floor, but it doesn't really quite have the, the flexibility and depth that Favela has. So Invasion gonna find itself in the B tier. Up next, we have Karachi. And honestly, I would say this map, it kind of feels like a reskin of Invasion. Like, the map design is definitely different, but in terms of what the map offers, it's exactly the same. You got your straight fighting, your house-to-house fighting, a couple buildings have, multiple floors that you can go onto, 1 or 2 rooftops you can go onto, but for me, it's not really offering anything unique that you can't get on pretty much every other city-based map, so Karachi also going to find itself in the B tier. Up next, we have Quarry. Now, I kind of like this map because it's pretty unique in terms of its design. Oftentimes, the maps are in a city or in a war zone or a field or something like that. But Quarry, as the name suggests, you are in a stone quarry, and I think that's pretty cool. There's definitely pretty unique parts of the map that you don't really see on many other parts of the Call of Duty maps. With that in mind, there are a few parts of Quarry that are kind of just annoying to navigate. Like, you go to a part and there's really only one way in or out of it, or 2 ways in or out. So Quarry, it's definitely a unique map, but in terms of gameplay, it's not one of my favorites, and it's going to find itself down in the C tier. Up next, we have Rundown, I believe, and this is another map that is kind of in the city, but it's more so a residential suburb when compared to, the downtowns of Invasion or Karachi. And so this map, there's, I would say the houses and buildings are more spaced out, so there's more room to fight in between, which I think lends itself to some more, medium to long range fights, which I quite like. So I felt like this map strikes a good balance between close range fighting within the houses and also medium to long range fighting, in the streets and in the open. So Rundown, I would say, is actually just a pretty solid map all around, and it's going to find itself up in the A tier. Up next, I don't think I even need to say the name of this map, Rust. For me, Rust is, the most famous Call of Duty map. You could argue that Nuketown is maybe more famous now because it's been in, every Black Ops and I think even Cold War now, but for me, Nuke will still always be the trademark Call of Duty map. I mean, I can remember playing this game so much with friends, having, quickscope competitions, trying to do 360 quickscopes off the top, and of course not taking fall damage because you're running Commando Pro. And honestly, I remember before the days where I played Xbox Live, I used to play with 2 other friends. We'd play split screen on one TV that was about 36 inches, so this tiny screen, and we had 3 players playing on it. So one person got, the big top half, and then me and another person had to share these bottom quadrants. And the screens were so small, but back then, we didn't know any better, and we loved it. We had so much fun playing this. I poured hundreds of hours into playing custom games and private matches on Rust. In multiplayer, I honestly don't think it's the best map, but it is just a perfect custom game map. Even if you just have 2 players, it's great for 1v1s, it's great for quick scoping. It's just such a great map, and for being so small, every single part of the map is unique and fun to explore. So Rust, I think it goes without saying, gonna find itself up in the S tier. Up next, we have a Scrapyard, which is not really a map I played in private matches, but played it a lot in multiplayer, and I just think that it's a really well-balanced map. You kind of have buildings on, big clusters of buildings on each end of the map, and then a few buildings on the sides, and then in the middle, you have a lot of close-range fighting within the Scrapyard of, the busted-up airplanes. And I just think that it's a really well-designed map. It works really well for a lot of different game modes, demolition, domination, search and destroy. I just think that it's a really good and fair map, regardless of what side of the map you're on. It just feels really well balanced. So Scrapyard gonna find itself in a solid A tier. Up next, we have Skid Row. Similar to Invasion in Karachi, this is another, downtown map. And I would say this one is even more so close range than the others. I wasn't really a huge fan of this one. I felt like if you weren't using a submachine gun or a shotgun on this map, you were probably going to get destroyed. Sniping on this map is almost out of the question because everything is just so close range. There's like 1 or 2 open areas on this map that even then, they're still not great for sniping or even using a longer range assault rifle. So Skid Row, not really a huge fan of this one, to be honest, and it's going to find itself down in the D tier. Up next, we have Subbass, which is another winter map, and as I mentioned, I'm not always a huge fan of winter maps, and Subbass is really no different. The coloration is relatively washed out. Not really a huge fan of the map design. It seems like there's clusters of buildings where like you're really close range, and then there's kind of gaps in between the buildings where there's just like nothing. And you're running around and it's just like, it's not really a fun map to navigate. It's kind of annoying and frustrating. It's a really campy map because there's a few buildings that like only have 1 or 2 entries, and people just place a claim over there and camp. So Subbass, honestly, not really a fan of this one, and it's going to find itself down in the D tier. Up next, we have another classic map, which is Terminal. This is, of course, a Modern Warfare 2 map, but they also brought it into Modern Warfare 3, which I absolutely loved. This is another great map. Whether you're playing multiplayer or custom games, I think it's just fantastic. Multiplayer, it's a super well-balanced, well-designed map. Every single part of the map feels purposeful, and it's, it's fun to explore. And then in private matches, we've had so much fun, playing hide and seek, Michael Myers, having quickscope competitions. If you have like more than 5 or 6 people, I would say Rust gets to be a bit small if you're trying to do a custom game, but Terminal is perfect if you have more than that. So Terminal, just a great map, really fun to explore, tons of great hiding spots for custom game modes as well. So Terminal, definitely going to be in the S tier. I would say in terms of multiplayer maps, definitely my favorite MW2 map, maybe my favorite Modern Warfare map in general. Up next we have Underpass, not to be confused with Overpass from CSGO, which is a great map. Underpass is not. This is probably my least favorite Modern Warfare 2 map. It's foggy, it's rainy, people with thermal scopes are destroying you from across the map, and it's just not really that fun to explore. To be honest, half the time when I got this map in multiplayer, I would usually just leave because I didn't want to play this map at all. Honestly, I really don't have many redeeming qualities to say about this map. I know some people kind of like the foggy, rainy aesthetic, but for me, I wasn't really a huge fan, and I don't like the map design either way. Half the time, I would just get lost, so Underpass are going to find itself down in the F tier. Last but not least, we have Wasteland. Now, as you can guess, this map was an open wasteland. There was pretty much nothing. There's a bunker in the very middle and like one house that didn't even have a roof or windows. And honestly, this map is a map where people with sniper rifles and grenade launchers dominated. It's one of the maps where you could easily, if you knew the enemy spawn point, you could, noob tube them across the map at the very beginning of the game and just get a bunch of kills. And I did not really enjoy that, and while I liked sniping in Modern Warfare 2, I was definitely more of an assault rifle user, and on this map, if you were out in the, grassy area, you're just getting destroyed by people with snipers, whether they're running a thermal scope or regular scope, doesn't matter. You were just getting crushed. And sure, you could go in the middle, into the bunker to kind of get some reprieve from the snipers, but it honestly really didn't help because people with danger close and grenade launchers and RPGs would constantly be shooting into the bunker, blowing you up. And then, worst case scenario, enemy gets a chopper gunner or an AC-130. There's really no place to hide. Like I said, there's the bunker, which, is always just getting blown up by explosives, or the one house, which, like I said, doesn't have a roof, so you can still get killed by kill streaks. So chopper gunners, I would say Wasteland is probably the most common map for people to get nukes on, because if you get your chopper gunner or an AC-130, you could easily get the rest of the kills you needed for your tactical nuke. So Wasteland, I was not really a huge fan of. Some of my friends really loved this one because they love to snipe, but Wasteland for me, not really a huge fan. It's not quite going to be F tier, but it is going to be a relatively low D tier. Well, that's my list. Let me know your guys' thoughts, and I hope you enjoyed.